sometimes controversial projects. The City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and fair meetings, and to achieve this goal, the board has adopted meeting procedures which are available to all parties at the back of the room, and everyone in attendance will have the opportunity to speak. These procedures, as I said, are outlined at the back of the room. Speaking on behalf of the entire board and city staff, our objective is to provide a review process that is thorough, fair, and without unnecessary delay. Our first order of business is review of the December 6th meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Any comments? Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The December 6th meeting minutes are approved. The first order of the agenda is, or the next order of the agenda is the continued consideration of a request for approval of demolition of an existing detached garage at the residence located at 91 Washington Circle, and approval of a new attached garage, additions and alterations to the existing residence and enhanced landscaping. Who will be speaking for the petitioner? Great. Carl, I don't think you realize that so many people were interested in your project tonight. Carl, if you could come to the podium, introduce yourself again, and
Hi, my name is Carl Jenkins. I'd like to welcome everybody here for coming to support me. Thank you. And I don't have much in terms of a formal presentation. This is obviously a continuation from the meeting last month. We were requested to provide the Building Review Board with an artist rendering of our proposed plan. So we did that, and we submitted it to you guys, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have or concerns.
do we have a copy to project, or?
No, I didn't bring an electronic copy to project. I figured that
Okay.
you guys would have it in your packet. I apologize if...
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, Kathy, would you like to just start us off with updating everybody on the board's decision to continue the petition last month, what the petitioner has provided, addressed, and the like of that would be great.
Sure. This is a petition, as noted, you considered it last month. The request is for approval of a two-story addition to the north of the house. The addition would replace an existing two-car detached garage. The addition would be an attached garage with second-floor living space over that garage, and a link between the existing four-square house and the two-story addition. At your last meeting, you generally supported the project. There were some questions about whether the setback of the addition was adequate to preserve the four-square character of the existing house, to minimize the appearance of mass from Washington Road, given that most of those properties have detached garages with garages located to the back. The board did continue the petition with a request to the petitioner to provide an artist rendering, which you do have in your packet. We were also provided a site plan that indicates the location from which that perspective was drawn, which will allow us, as we move forward into construction drawings, to really true up and make sure that the elevations really do play out in a manner that's similar to what's reflected in the artist rendering. The overall concern is the addition should always look secondary to the main mass of the house. So with this rendering, it does appear that the step back distance does create distinction between the front of the existing house. There's a bit of a change in height. The main roofs are fairly close, but this does show a bit of a step down. The board also asked for some refinement of the detailing on the linking element, the secondary porch, and you'll notice in the rendering the arch which over that entry, which really was unique and wasn't represented anywhere else on the house, has been removed, and the interior wall, or the setback wall of the linking element, was detailed with different exterior materials. So if you do see fit to move this forward, we believe that the issues you raised at the last meeting were addressed, and we would just recommend perhaps the appointment of a subcommittee of the board just to work with staff to assure that the elevations ultimately presented, the construction drawings, do align with what's represented in the rendering. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we get started, has there been any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest since we last met?
I should say I'm friends with the Jenkins, but have no conflicts of interest financially.
Thank you. All right. With that, Chris, any questions for the petitioner?
I do not. I, had some of the concerns that we just raised after the last meeting about trying to get a better idea of how it was set back, and I felt the rendering accomplished that for me. So I don't have any additional questions.
I do. Do you have the drawing with you in front of you?
Yeah, I do.
Right, so I get my terminology a little wrong sometimes, so.
That's
bear with
okay. I wouldn't know if you got it right.
me. All right, so, Ross, is the vertical board the fascia that's right below the gutter, or the gutters?
The horizontal board?
No, the vertical board. You know, it's like a 6-8 inch tall board. The gutter screwed to it?
Talking about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah, that's a
Corner board.
fascia.
That's the fascia, right?
Well, that's a horizontal board then.
No, but the board goes vertical in the house. Well, it's the fascia board. So take a look at the fascia board on the porch of the main house. It's above the columns. It seems not a very large height to it. Then if you look at the fascia board on the addition, it looks 2 to 3 times larger, 2 to 3 times taller. And I just want to make sure that we're using the same types of fascia boards wrapping around.
Yeah, absolutely. As I expressed during the last meeting, I want to make sure that this addition looks like it was part of the original design, and so we're going to use all the same materials, so.
Well, Bob brings up a good point, though, that detailing is not consistent with the original home. It looks like it may be a frieze board that stepped back from the fascia, actually, so.
Against the main
maybe
wall.
your designer can weigh in on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to ask Bob to chime in.
Bob, why don't you come to the podium,
Yeah.
introduce yourself, please, and then look at the fascia above the garage door. And it might just be how you've rendered it, but if you could speak to the detailing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing the, if you're looking at the porch, the existing porch fascia is just an 8-inch board. And what you're seeing on the garage, the new garage, it's still gonna be an 8-inch fascia, but there's a frieze board that's set back that's almost blends the two into one. So that frieze board is gonna be set back flush with the wall. The fascia is projected out 1 foot in front of that.
Right, then, there's one more question I have too, is on the, on
Bob,
the.
can I just interrupt
Oh,
one
sure,
second?
yeah, absolutely.
Bob, can you elaborate, is that feature consistent with what's on the house now?
Yeah, we're just matching all the same lines, same materials to match and make it look like part of the original house.
I'm sorry, Bob.
No, that's good, I'm glad you did that. Then the other one is, on your, what looks like, more of a site plan, your proposed site plan, it looks as if the entryway, well, how to describe this? There's the existing 2-story house, and then as you go north, there's a little square rectangle, a rectangle saying new addition. Do you
Right.
see that?
Yep.
And then to the left of that, it says the words entry vertically.
Right.
And it looks like it's stepped back a little bit from the garage. That house.
The columns are inside of that, the roof is straight across, the front of the garage roof continues across. So it's just a little wider overhang at that point.
The garage is a little wide overhang.
Yes.
Oh, so, then that's good. So you're gonna have a relief there where that little entryway is?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
Ross?
So per Kathy, a number of the items that were raised in our last meeting, looks like you've addressed several of them. We appreciate that. The garage doors have been modified. The detailing, the exterior materials on that, the area that Bob was just discussing the side entry, now matched. I want to reiterate, though, that this rendering is inaccurate as it relates to what you just mentioned in terms of matching the details. The freeze board is much larger, so I guess just as a universal issue here, the overall notion of this board on this petition is to maintain the dominance of the original structure, the historic structure that's prominent on that corner. And this addition is subservient to that. We would actually prefer to see it further set back, as you know. So it's further in the shadows and even more subservient, but certainly do not call attention to it with any deviation or anything that's dominant in features or style, including, Kathy, in the staff report raised the notion of the columns. We talked about that last meeting as well. The original home with the 5 columns in front, that's historic, that's the nature of the home. By adding columns on the addition, the link, understand what you're doing, you're trying to provide consistency in a flow. However, I would prefer, and staff would prefer, to see those columns lost, because that creates more of a subservient area to that, and you're not calling attention to it. We really want the main massing of the home to be prominent and the features left dominant. Landscape plan is important. Kathy, staff report, I believe, mentioned there has, the landscape plan you've been submitted was from 1990-something or other.
I believe it's a plan for the existing landscaping, and some of that over time may have fallen away, so probably an update of what's there, and then the intended enhancement would be appropriate to have with this, rather than something dated 1992 or 94.
So what is your intention with respect to landscape plan?
Per Kathy's request, that's exactly what we're going to do, is provide her, she already communicated that to us, so
I've been in touch with 2 landscape architects, and
That-
I'm gonna have them
that's forthcoming.
draft something just as next.
Okay, that's, just so you know, our feeling is landscaping is as important as the structure itself, so
I agree.
there needs to be a focus on that, and
No, I,
staff or subcommittee approval.
sure. Ross, I totally agree. And as I mentioned during the last meeting, that was actually one of the things that drew me to the house when we first bought it, was that curbside appeal, and the landscaping was a big part of that. So I couldn't agree more.
But overall, we appreciate your response to our comments last meeting, so thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, Peter?
I have no questions.
Great. Carl, I think the rendering really helped us all get our hands around the fact that the new addition is de-emphasized and not as prominent as the one-dimensional elevations suggest. The additional columns next to the garage, I'm really indifferent on. I guess I would defer to my colleagues whether they feel that they're too much in addition to the existing columns, but otherwise I'm fully supportive of the plan. Kathy, my recollection is we did, well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but is there any other questions for the petitioner or staff at this point? All right. With that, I invite anyone who's in attendance, if they have any questions for the petitioner, you're welcome to come forward. All right. Hearing none, any final discussion? Kathy, my only thing for you is, we did not approve demolition last time, correct?
I don't think we did.
Demolition of the garage?
Right, the partial demolition.
No, the motion tonight should incorporate all of that.
All right. So the first item of discussion is, do I hear a motion for the partial demolition of the existing structure?
Move to approve the demolition of the garage.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion for the partial demolition is approved. With regard to the replacement structure, it sounds like there's some refining that was discussed. Do I hear a motion to either approve what has been presented or,
Let me say what I'm thinking. That, that we move to approve the petition as it's submitted, subject to certain criteria, including the staff recommendations. That criteria would be that, that the chairman would have the option to appoint a subcommittee to review the drawings, the actual construction drawings, to make sure that ultimately that the plans themselves and the construction are consistent with what we discussed here and these renderings as a main issue. That we talk about an enhanced landscape plan to shield the neighbors to the north. That, and that they really look hard at potentially removing the columns to enhance the subservient nature of the addition. Does that sound right? That's my discussion.
all right?
So if no objections, I'll move. Sorry, I move to approve the.
I'd like to add to that, that we discussed this last meeting as well, and Kathy's spoken of it also, that it's important that the rendering and the construction documents are aligned, and then execution in the field is in complete compliance with the construction documents.
All right, there's a motion.
Yeah, sorry, I'll move to approve
Board
the.
Member Reed is here, microphone on.
Yes. I'll move to approve the petition as submitted, subject to the conditions that's laid out in the staff report for tonight's meeting, with these additional requirements, that the chairman have the option to appoint a subcommittee, if he deems appropriate, to confirm that the plans, the construction drawings, and the construction itself are consistent with the rendering that was submitted for tonight's meeting, that the petitioner and chairman or the subcommittee work with staff to take the columns out if it'll enhance the subservient nature of that addition. And lastly, that they would look to an enhanced landscape plan to shield the neighbors to the north.
Do I hear a second?
I will second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion to proceed with the replacement structure is approved. Kathy will circle back whether it's necessary to have any follow-up discussion, so. Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.
Getting kind of long-winded.
Next on our agenda is the consideration of a request for approval of the design aspects of a proposed commercial development waterway car wash, including gas pumps and a convenience store. The property proposed for development is located on the southeast corner of Waukegan and Everett Roads and is commonly referred to as the former site of a gas station and garden store. The board's purview includes the design, exterior materials, and architectural detailing of all proposed structures. In addition, the board will consider landscaping, lighting, and signage plans with attention to mitigating impacts on residential properties to the east and south and enhancing the streetscapes. With that, has there been any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest that we should be aware of?
No.
Okay. With that, I welcome whoever's representing the petitioner to the podium. If you'd be kind enough to introduce yourselves, and welcome.
Hello, I'm Mike Goldman. I'm Vice President, General Counsel, Waterway Gas and Wash. And you're not going to hear much from me tonight. You're going to hear from Jay Schessel, our architect. You're also going to hear, if you have any questions, we brought our landscape designer as well as our lighting expert. But what I do want to say before I turn it over to Jay is we put a lot of thought into building something that is unique for Lake Forest. This is a unique building. This is not a cookie cutter. This is not something that we've put up. This is based on what we've seen in the community. This is what we've based on what we see in the neighborhood as to really complement and really enhance the streetscape on Waukegan Road where it is currently. So with that, I'll call up Jay Schessel.
Thank you. Good evening.
And we have a PowerPoint.
Good evening. My name is Jay Schessel. I'm with SP Architects, and I am the architect and designer for Waterway for this project. We've got a presentation here that I'm going to just kind of walk through for you real quick. I think you guys have all seen it. I think it's the same thing that's been presented previously. The first one is site contextual map, just basically showing the area, showing the site, which is labeled as number 1. I'm just going to move through these probably fairly quickly. There's an enlarged area of the actual site, which was labeled number 1 on the last sheet. Again, since I'm mainly here to speak to the building, the architecture, the detail, and the design, I'm going to kind of get through to that part. Again, just a graphic site plan showing the location of the building on the site with the fueling canopy, the circulation through the site. This sheet is the putting our building in context with your community. It's basically when we designed this, we designed it unique to your city, complement the city, to work with the same materials, the same architecture that's found in your city. That's really all the buildings neighboring up and down the streets that are close to this are real similar in design and in materials. We've used face brick on the building, and we'll get to a few more elevations and stuff a little more detailed on that. It'll be a full masonry face brick, 4-inch thick. The cast stone at the base of the building will be a full 4-inch cast stone. So again, it's a heavy material, longevity. Sure, longevity of the material will be, as you can see in the other buildings in your community, they've been here for 100 years. So it's the same materials that have been used in the architecture that you're used to seeing. I'm just going to move forward through it. The building itself is pretty much a retail as far as the front facade looks. We've got, again, the cast stone base on it. We've got clear glass storefront and aluminum pre-finished storefront system. We've got colonnade through the face of the building with the main portion of the building stepping forward for the main entry, which is the center of the building with the gable top over it, which again pronounces here's the entry. It's an architectural element that really pronounces what and where you should go in the building. It's sort of wayfinding and just explains itself. The roof is architectural shingles. There'll be asphalt shingles, but a heavy architectural asphalt shingle. The banding above the storefront would be probably a synthetic product is what we were proposing, like a FIPON. It'll have the moldings, the trim work, and all the pieces of that would be in this product. It's really indistinguishable from wood once it's up and painted, but yet lasts a whole lot longer. The maintenance over time with that product has been proven to be really good. Just a couple more views around the building. Straight on elevation, calling out the materials that we just spoke about. Both end elevations are very similar. They do have the overhead door for the car wash, which really matches the rest of the building. Again, it's got a polycarbonate, which is like a glass panel in the door, aluminum frame door, same as the storefront system and the entry points. The back of the building is with no fenestration, and that is by design to keep sound, to keep it. It really will keep the insulated part of the brick and the cast stone base and everything will just maintain that none of the sound or anything is projected towards off the property. Everything else, all the openings are towards the streets and towards the public way. Roof plan. We have a well in the top of the roof, which is completely surrounded by what we'll call a mansard or the gables, which will screen all the mechanical units. So the mechanical units will be set in the well, and none of them will be higher than the ridge of the roof. So they should all be non-visible from the street level anywhere around the building. The fueling canopy will complement the building and the same architecture. It'll have a cast stone base on each column. The columns will be face brick. They will have a capital on them with cast stone on it at the top underneath the gas canopy, the the roof structure itself. We're proposing the structure to be an EFIS product. It would be detailed to match the building, and color would match the building also. This slide is signage locations. It's basically calling out each place that we are proposing signage on the building. You probably would need to see it a little closer. Obviously, I can't read it from here up on the screen there, but it will call out each sign by number, and then the next page will locate them again in a site plan format. And then this will show you in a 3D rendering where each sign is on the building close up, and then we'll get a couple of those as we go around the building. And then this sheet gives you dimensional sizes for each of the signs that are detailed and called out in the previous slides. We're proposing a fence around the fueling canopy and parking lot area. This fence would be the same architecture that the building is. It'll have brick columns. I believe it is 10 feet tall. It'll have a cast stone cap on it, and then wood, solid wood, between each brick column. So there's no gaps in the wood. There's no gaps under it or through it. So it'll be a really complete privacy fence. And it's denoted at where it's located by the yellow on the screen. We proposed the full landscape plan. It's quite extensive. If there's questions, we have our landscape architect here that can speak to that when we get to that part. Lighting, likewise, we've got pretty extensive lighting layout, lighting details. I think we even have a photometrics in here, which is this. We've got a larger sheet if we need to be able to read all the numbers on that, and we do have a lighting designer here to speak to this also. So that's pretty much my part of just sort of explaining the building and materials. If there's questions, that would be welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before we get started, I do want to just reiterate and emphasize the purview of this board is strictly the architectural design, lighting, landscaping features. So I know you're all here and interested, and there'll be an opportunity to come up and approach the petitioner and the board later on. And as you are thinking about your thoughts, just focus on the matter at hand and what the purview of this board is. With that, Kathy, any guidance that there's quite a bit of to this petition, a lot of elements, and any direction that you can help us as we start pulling it all together would be helpful.
Sure. This matter was referred to the Building Review Board by the City Council. The City Council recently considered a recommendation from the Plan Commission and voted 5-3 to preliminarily indicate support of a special use permit for this project. The City Council has not taken final action. They wanted the Building Review Board to conduct its review, particularly because they recognize that this is a prominent site as you enter the business district, that the use itself, as has been discussed for many months by the Plan Commission, has the potential to have off-site impacts. You have neighboring properties to the east and to the south. The City Council specifically asked the Building Review Board to consider lighting and to consider signage along with your normal review, and landscaping along with your normal review of the building. You do have a staff report in front of you that tries to identify questions, areas where clarification is needed, and that staff report is broken down into several categories. The first focuses on the building. The building is a pretty straightforward commercial building. It is one whose design is really driven by the function. A car wash by its nature requires a long, narrow building. The building has some high quality materials. You heard that individual bricks and stone, cast stone of thickness of 4 inch, would appreciate some board discussion of the roof form. It really is essentially a mansard roof with a well, designed to conceal the mechanical equipment for front-facing gables, or 3 front-facing gables, one on the main front that faces Waukegan Road, and then one north to the north and south elevations. The gables on the north and south elevations appear to be primarily intended for signage. The landscape plan is fairly well detailed, provides, the city arborist has reviewed it and did find that it presents a strong landscape plan for both of the streetscapes. There's also landscaping proposed on the south perimeter and east perimeter, as well as landscaping proposed on neighboring residential properties. That, of course, would not, it could be part of the council's requirement, but it would only be done subject to approval or agreement from those neighboring properties. You do have a lighting plan. We would suggest that some further detail is needed on the lighting, in particular information on the heights of the various poles. We have received some input from residents who have been down to the Northbrook site, concerned about the overall brightness. The finishing area is to the north of the site, so it is away from the homes, but really understanding the heights of those lights. You do have fixtures. I believe LED lights are proposed, so that does help to direct the light downward. But certainly with the lights that are adjacent to the residential property line, having a drop-down shield really as a extra protection to make sure that light is prevented from spilling over onto the neighboring properties is important. We didn't identify any exterior lighting on the building. We assume there is some. In fact, some is required by code, but understanding where that lighting is and what the fixtures will be important. You do have an illustration in your packet that responds to the request to show step down of lighting and a turn off of lighting after the business closes. Now, certainly for security and safety purposes, there would need to be some minimum lighting, but understanding that lighting reduction plan is really very important. Signage, the signage as proposed does exceed fairly significantly the signage that will be permitted for a corner site in the commercial district. In particular, we would ask the board to consider whether any signage on the south-facing fuel canopy should be prohibited, just to avoid that relationship of signage directly facing the residential condominiums to the south. We would appreciate some direction from you on overall signage. In the business district, a monument sign of up to 24 square feet is permitted, I believe 5 feet in height. The monument sign appears to meet the height requirement and be slightly larger than the 24 square feet. The code also permits a wall or window sign of up to 25 feet or 5% of the square footage of the building elevation. In situations where properties are in the corner, 2 signs can be located, but the code does limit it to that square footage. Certainly, anything over and above the code does require board approval. You've certainly approved signage that is in excess to some extent of what's permitted in the code, and in fact, that's your role. The signage is proposed as internally illuminated. Often, the board has required that signage be backlit or ground lit to avoid that internal illumination, although you have approved some internal illumination. So it might be some mix, but we would ask for some direction on the signage, and then we would propose to go back and work with the petitioners to bring you a refined signage plan. So those are really the 4 categories. You do have, I believe, 18 recommendations or suggestions in the staff report, but really at this meeting, looking for your input, your questions, your direction. We do think there's further work to be done on this, so we do recommend that the board consider continuing this to give us additional time to refine and understand the detail.
Thank you, Kathy. Peter, any questions for Kathy or the petitioner?
For the petitioner, a few. If we can go back to the first slide that shows the front elevation with the actual rendering of the building. And, well, right,
Signage on it, like here.
perfect. So discuss further I understand the brick and the stone, but the white surface below the roof line?
That would be I'm going to use a manufacturer's term of FIPON. It could be some other product of a synthetic material. The general look of this is going to be painted with trim. In other words, it's trim boards, different levels. There's 2 or 3 different levels of trim as this steps out towards the gutter board and as it frames each area above each set of storefront windows.
All right, so, obviously, as a committee, we try to avoid unnatural materials here. Did you consider a wood product?
Sure, yeah, and it certainly, wood would be pretty much identical in look when we're all finished. It just doesn't last as long. That's the reason we would go to the FIPON product. It comes in sheets just like wood. It's cut just like wood. It just doesn't rot.
Okay.
And it is a painted surface when it's done, just like wood.
But does it age like wood, or is it just kind of looks new all the time?
It will stay pretty sharp and pretty new all the time. It's not gonna, it will age some. You're gonna get, as it weathers, the corners are gonna weather, the edges are gonna weather some, so they won't stay that sharp. It's not harder than wood, because you cut it with the same materials that you cut wood with.
Okay. Should we talk signage too? Everything the same? All right, so obviously, we're gonna, as a committee, I would think that we're gonna cut down on signage. So a few things. I would say definitely on the exit of the car wash, I'm not sure that the signage is necessary there, and certainly on the canopies. Obviously, with the white background, the logo really pops out and it stands out. So I think the signage that we see there, that if I'm looking at it correctly, on the right side of that rendering would be where the cars enter the car wash.
That is correct.
Okay, so, it would be my observation that if you were to, those are the 2 most important parts on the building for signage. You probably want to sign by the corner, on the corner where the 2 streets meet. So that would be my recommendation, of the fact that, just scrap the logo on the exit and the canopies. And also, can you just explain a little bit your thought process, or the process you guys gone through to dampen the noise that's going to be created by the car wash architecturally?
Yeah, well, let me jump in here. Excuse me. So there's been a lot of discussion about noise on here, and there are a series of things that we've done. The first thing, and the thing that's got more impact than anything, is that the back wall of the building is it's masonry and block and masonry, and actually there is a room, our equipment room, before the actual car wash blowers, which has been part of the concern. Then the other thing architecturally that we've done is, well, several other things. We have proposed 2 walls inside the tunnel. Obviously, car has to go through them, so the walls have openings in them, but to create a area to hold the sound. And then what we've done is beyond that, and we've pulled those deeper into the tunnel. Then beyond that, what we've done is we're going to put sound deadening material on the walls and also the roof of the tunnel to help soak in what makes it past the 2 walls in the sound deadening chamber, is what we've been calling it. We also have proposed fast open doors at the entry and exit of the car wash tunnel. Those are the doors that we were talking about that have these polycarb windows in them. They will go up and down when they're able to between cars, and that's also a way of deadening the sound. So it's really been an all-encompassing, not just a strict architectural. It's how can we hit this from as many angles as possible.
Great. So has your company designed these facilities before with noise issues with close neighbors like this case?
Yes.
And good success?
There are things that we're doing here that are beyond what we've done at other sites, but absolutely many of the things we've taken are exactly what we've done to bring down noise. And the biggest thing that we've done here that is sort of transparent, transparent, maybe not the right word, that you wouldn't see is traditional car washes have the vacuum condenser outside. That's how many of ours used to. We've now taken that vacuum condenser and put it inside in a full masonry broom. So that's the loudest thing that we have that makes the most noise. So that is something we've done. We've also done the fast rise doors. We've also done some of the walls. We've never put up sound deadening material before because we haven't needed to.
Okay, and just so I get a handle on the door situation.
Yes.
Say it's a Saturday morning and there are 20 cars and it's constantly going. Would the doors open and close if there is car after car after car, or is it one of those situations where the doors stay open, and if there's a gap, you close the doors, or they open and close during the normal operation when it's full capacity?
If it's full capacity, the doors simply are going to be up most of the time. You're going to have gaps. Now, these are very fast doors. You don't need 20 feet, but you do need some space between the cars, pardon me, to have them go up and down safely.
Great. And then we'll talk about the fencing. Can you go back to that slide?
See which way is that?
I'm not sure which way.
I think that's further up here.
There it is.
There we go, sorry.
So I assume it's the yellow.
Yes.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't continue it down behind the building?
There'd be no reason to continue it down behind the building, and we're pretty close to the lot line. I don't really know that we have the space. And frankly, I think the full brick on the back of the building is as attractive, if not more attractive, than a wood fence.
Okay. And Kathy, you were talking about perhaps some landscaping on the neighboring lots. Would this be an area where would be a candidate for such a project, or is that a parking lot to the other building?
On the landscape plan, there is landscaping shown east of that wall, and I'd ask the petitioner to talk about whether that's on your site or intended to be on the neighboring office site.
So I'm not sure which one of these buttons will make a light, so I'm not gonna. There is landscape shown on this side, so on the side that's next to the commercial building, that is on the neighbor's property, and we
Kathy,
have an
do we have a
agreement with the
pointer?
neighbor.
Yeah.
Does this, I assume one of these, I just can't see what points, maybe this? Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So there is some landscape over here, which is on the neighbor's side of the wall. And we have a separate agreement with the neighbor regarding that. We're also showing these trees as well as these, which are on the neighbor's side of the wall. We, at this point, do not have any agreements with the neighbors. That's our proposal. They obviously, if they choose to have us do that, we certainly will.
But nothing planned for the back of the building, that sheer brick wall?
Actually, the owner of this property, this commercial property, he has a plan that goes here and here. It's just not incorporated in this plan. And our landscape designer, who actually is here, and she spoke to him, so she might be able to speak a little more clearly about that.
Hi there, Colleen Barkley with Mariani Landscape. To answer your question, I met with Carmine, and that's not the photo.
That's the green one.
We have new plantings right along this adjacent back here on his property. I met with the forester out on site to look at the existing trees that were there and what would be lost as far as the tree roots cut and what we could put back, and then met with the adjacent owner. So we do have new plantings, so we have consistency with the palette around the entire property.
Okay. It's just that brick wall would look a little stark, I think. And, we're obviously, if this goes through, we want to soften it as much as possible, and landscaping would do that. And in regards to the lighting, have you guys determined what your hours of operation might be?
It's on here.
Yes, we
Somewhere.
have. We do have our hours of operation that we have proposed, and we pulled them back quite a bit. Our gas and convenience store, we are proposing Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Car wash, those same Monday through Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And then on Sundays, our gas convenience store, 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and car wash, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
All right, great. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Peter. Russ?
So I just want to understand
Yes, sir.
a few points. The ingress to the car wash to the tunnel is at the south end between the gas canopy and whatever this structure is, so vehicles will swing around and in on that south side there.
Absolutely.
Right.
So cars, they may or may not get gas beforehand. There's the gas canopy. That is the entry for the car wash tunnel.
So if you're doing a brisk business, there will be vehicles lined up around that area.
Well, so yes, there could be some cars, but lined up around that area is not what's going to happen. We have we don't do anything at our entrance except load your car onto the car wash and onto the track. So there is where the drying, the vacuuming, all those things occur. So we are able to pull cars in very quickly, and that's typically we have very little queue at the entry of our car wash tunnel.
So you'll be detailing the car and drying it, obviously drying, but
That's-
detailing it at the exit.
Yes.
And
in
is the
those stalls.
drying a hand drying process? You'll have attendants there doing that outside the building?
Yeah, so it's a hand towel dry, so it's a traditional full service hand towel dry, vacuum, and depending on what the customer gets, interior windows, other cleaning inside.
But that north area, will it be chaotic or will there be an order to that
So-
process?
It is highly ordered. We have on-site management always at the exit. We've got teams of people working in every car. It is a highly ordered process, and it's frankly what we've done for 48 years. That's what we do best, is to organize our exits, get our customers' needs met, and move them through.
So what happens in the winter? Gets kind of cold around here.
I wouldn't know about that.
With all the fluids and the water and all the runoff, I know you'll have trench drains, I'm sure, at each end.
Yes.
However, vehicles are pulling over those and there's water still running off. How do you control the ice buildup, et cetera, at the exit in that parking area?
So the most significant thing we do is we heavily salt. We salt the heck out of the ground. We don't use salt. We use melting material that keeps it, because you can't have that. You got to keep that. You got to keep the water moving. You can't create ice slicks, just for nothing else, for safety of our employees.
So is there a curb built in that parking area to retain the chemicals and the fluids? And Mariani, how's that going to impact your plant material with all the chemicals?
So she can answer that. As far as chemicals and fluids, there's really not much that comes off.
There's a curb. There's a curb all the way down, and then salt in all sides of this property because of the roadways and adjacency to the pavement. Planting palette is definitely considered of what is the most tolerable for those plants' success.
The polycarbonate carbon windows, carbonite windows on the
Let's call it
doors
that, yes.
in the winter with the steam and the temperature disparity inside and out and all the humidity and moisture, what do you anticipate the freeze up will look like on those doors a day like this?
I was at our Northbrook location a couple hours ago. They look clear.
And similarly, the storefront windows, what's the separation between the front of house and the back of house? Is it block and insulation? What separates the tunnel from the front store?
Yeah, so it's blocking insulation, and we've got big, we call them picture windows, because not just picture, because you get to see the car wash, the cars going through the tunnel. Kids like to watch the show. Everybody likes to watch the show. So it's a heavy block, but with thick windows too. Inside the tunnel, if that's what you're asking, if I'm answering the right question.
Right, I'm just trying to understand what the moisture and humidity and freeze issue will be around the shell in the winter.
That has really never been an issue. I mean, I are certainly the mechanical people who we've worked with forever, the HVAC people and mechanical people, they know what business we're in, and that just hasn't been an issue that I'm aware of that I've ever really seen. I know that, I mean, Jay might be able to speak more to it technically, but I know there's lots of exhaust pulled through or cross. I'm a little out of my depth on those terms, but I know we do a good job keeping it clean.
So the plan, the engineering plan by Manhard reflects that the fence around the south perimeter piece is 8 foot tall. I thought I heard 10 foot tall.
It is. It was originally 8 feet, and if that hasn't been updated on that plan, that's our mistake. It's a 10-foot wall.
And that's been approved by the city, Kathy?
A 10-foot fence is a requirement of the recommended approval.
The synthetic product for the exterior trim material,
Yes.
historically, this board and the city frowns on synthetic materials for residential applications because we prefer the weathering process. We prefer an organic aging process, give the material and the structure a sense of time. However, with the commercial structure like this, especially the nature of it with the water and the moisture and the elements, if this were anything but synthetic, and you would have a constant maintenance program that I doubt you would keep up with, and in short order would look terrible.
I think you're and frankly, the 5-pound material is well more expensive than wood, so it's...
So I support it, in other words, I support it in this application. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ross.
What kind of wood are you gonna use for the fence?
That's a...
That should be
I would
wood.
that is wood, and I would think cedar. Yeah, that's the... I would say cedar, yes.
Okay. Did you get a chance to look at the city's recommendations?
Right when we got in here is when I first saw them.
All right, so there's so many of them, so I'm gonna kind of walk you through them and see what we can do with them.
Sure.
One of the first one that they talk about, which is what I'm concerned about too, is that we're gonna need the building canopy elevations, a detail with dimensions, basically to document the footprint. That's what we're gonna be looking for. And they're talking about the setback of the side elements from the main mass of the front elevation, including the height of the various roof forms. That'll be okay. You guys will be able to come back with that, right?
Sure. I believe we actually, somehow it fell off a plan. Those are done, so I apologize for those not having gotten to you.
I think one of the things they're thinking about is you're gonna have the roof on the main building, then you're gonna have the canopy over the gas pumps. We're just trying to figure out what's going on with that. Then also the lighting, right? So how tall your light poles are gonna be. One of the recommendations is that they say they wanna put shields on those lights so it doesn't spill over the neighbor's property. You think that's gonna be a problem?
So house side shields is what we're showing on it, and that's what we're planning.
Okay, even better. That's great. Okay. One of the things that people complain about all the time is being able to see those mechanicals on top of these roofs. And it slipped through the cracks in a couple of buildings, and we are constantly harassed. So you said earlier that the height of the well, or the depth of the well, is going to be deep enough to cover the tallest mechanical. Is that correct?
So yes, and I spoke with Jay about this and our construction person about, because I knew this was a concern. And I said, well, why can't we just put in what it's going to be? And the answer I got, which again might be a little beyond my depth, is they said, well, the mechanicals, we don't know what's going to get spec'd out. We don't know if they're going to say you need this many units or this, you need 3 units, we need 4 units. If it's 3 units, they need to be 4 feet high. If it's 4 units, it can be 3 feet high. But what we can do is say, it doesn't matter exactly what units we're going to use. We can, if we have it as a specification of the plan that they cannot be taller than the depth of the well, then that's what we'll make it. But to know the exact units that we're going to use that's just a difficult question until we get to construction documents.
Okay, but that's gonna be a real big consideration for us.
Sure.
Just so you know. We catch a little bit of grief on the trash and recycling areas as well, and how they're concealed, and it wasn't mentioned in your discussion today. But it seems like, is it right over there by the entranceway to the?
That's the trash enclosure. It's going to be made out of the same materials as the building, same brick, same stone, cap. The doors, obviously, they got to be metal, because if they aren't, they aren't going to make it. But that's where that's going to be.
So is it enclosed, completely shielded, so the doors are solid doors enclosing dumpsters, in essence?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. You did say that your brick was gonna be 4 inches. I think I heard you say that.
Yeah, full 4-inch thick brick. Yeah.
Right. And it's gonna be installed on site, not in panels?
No. Yes, it'll be individually installed by masons.
Ross talked about the materials, and to be perfectly honest, in a commercial setting, especially with this much water, I think I'm okay with it too. But I did talk about this EFIS, E-F-I-S, for use on the cabinet. Can you describe it?
Yeah.
It's not like a flimsy plastic, is it? It's something a little more substantial?
Drive it,
Oh, it's driving? Okay.
which we don't use residentially any longer, but it's still used commercially.
It is?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Wow. Okay. There was an issue with the windows as well. Some of the windows had broken up panels in the top section. The highest section was broken up, but it wasn't matched all the way around. Was that the intent, or could you match them all the way around?
I read that comment this evening, and I honestly, I'm gonna go back to the elevations and see if we can figure out where that is pointed out.
Yeah, if you go to the front, you can actually see the
Okay, so-
divided lights, for lack of a better term.
Above, so we got, what I'm gonna say is in the far right and the far left, there are 3 panels.
Right.
And of the big storefront, and then above that, they're broken down to 6 panels. That concept should follow right through to the side, and so these they would be the same. They should be the same.
That's your intent?
Yes, the intent is that they're the same. When you turn the corner, the same storefront feel is gonna be on the sides.
Okay, great. We've been talking a lot about landscape, and there's neighbors that are really close. We all know this is a problem. And two of the things, noise is not our issue, it's another board, but lighting is our issue, and streetscapes are our issue. So one of the things that we really need to be comfortable with, as far as landscape goes, is that the landscaping is gonna properly address the streetscape entirely, and also be a buffer between your east wall, in essence, and the neighbors. And I noticed that if you want to go back to that landscape plan, could you describe to us how you're gonna accomplish that?
Here we go. I'm going to let Colleen describe that, because she'll do a better job than I will.
And Colleen, can you just give us some heights too, so we know what you're.
Sure. So I just want to make sure you referencing this side?
Yeah, and
And
the
down.
lower part, especially the lower part, right?
Okay.
Because that's
So-
the commercial section on the top right, or the bottom right, I guess.
Right,
Right.
right. So what has to be considered here is the light, actually, that's be coming from, because this is west, so, and then you have the commercial building here. So we have proposed plants that can take that shade in there. And then we have a couple different heights As we move here, we get a little more light. We have a series of viburnum, some cornelian cherries, which are an ornamental, so that goes taller. That's, they're more in the 15-foot range. Where the Arrowwoods, they'll, be between the 8 and 10-foot range. And then over on this backside, we have some existing trees along that tree line. And then we have proposed because some of them aren't the greatest quality trees in there. There's Siberian elm in there. So looking at kind of what we can do to intermittently replace those with some disease-resistant elms. So that's your shade tree, that those will grow in extreme height. They're a fast-growing tree as well. So that will help kind of disguise the canopy of the gas canopy. And then you have your tall fence that's 10 feet. There's some existing arbs that are off the property to the east here. So I don't want to continue those down because I want to have those have success with shade as well coming from the west. So maintaining those existing arbs and kind of adding to those where we can to help screen that to the east. And then as you go to the south, there's some declining willows existing on the south property. The forester and I looked at that as well, and we want to work with the neighbors on what, as represented here as 3 trees, what those are that they'd like to help soften the views this way. On the Waterways property right here, we have, a narrow area of planting. So I've proposed more of a columnar tree that gets height but doesn't get the width, because we want to make sure everything is maintainable here in what's allowed in this space. And so those are a columnar oak actually in there that have done well. So those will exceed the fence height in time. So.
I'm also under the understanding, either you or somebody else made a comment earlier about that you have reached out to the neighbors on the base south and east, actively talking to them about solving these kind of shielding problems.
I have been in touch with the commercial neighbor, and I believe it's the intent of the petitioner once we're moving along to connect with the neighbors to the south of the condominiums and the neighbors to the east of the residences to talk further about the plant material that influences their property, is on their property, and how it complements the plant material on waterways.
So it sounds like there's a budget for that extra work. Is that what, that's kind of what I'm hearing? Yeah, that's it? Okay. Let's see. The signage issue, it's gonna come up again and again and again. And Kathy, can you, when I look at signs, I look at the waterway wording as a sign, and then I look at the logo as a sign, or does the city look at it as one sign, the two together?
The sign area is calculated by the two together. Again, the board can approve signage that exceeds the code, but I believe any graphics are limited in the code to 15% of the sign area. I think I have the percentage right. I need to double check that. But it's the whole area that's calculated as the square footage for the sign.
The facade that's below the signs on the main building, it's yellowish on the paper that you gave me, the color. Is it gonna be a similar yellow color to that?
So it should be, I don't want to say pure white, but it is much whiter. The yellow, the butter color yellow is just something that happened in translation and video displays or printing or something. It should be white.
Well, then, if the water, but that's great, I mean, I appreciate that. But the waterway, the word sign is white too. Is it gonna get lost in the white on white?
Waterways in blue.
The waterway sign's a wood sign?
That's in blue, not in white.
I'm sorry?
It's in blue. It's not white.
Oh, no,
in the
but
front.
the words are white. Or are the words blue?
That's,
The symbols.
Do you have a better rendering of your sign?
yeah, let me take a look here.
You're right there.
Oh, they are showing light.
Yeah.
So what color are the words?
So they're blue. Are they not? Oh, we're looking at the. That's something we ought to come back and make a whole lot clearer in a better drawing.
Okay, yeah, all right, so I know your logo is blue.
Yes.
I get that concept.
Typically, our word has changed from being a white to a blue to a white to a blue several times. We are currently using a blue, so
Okay.
this fell out also.
All right, we'd like to see that. And then how do you light your logo and how do you light the words?
So they are all internally illuminated. They are not on a raceway or anything. It's actually on the building face. We don't really like raceways very much, and so they're internally illuminated.
So each letter in the words is a separate lighting fixture in essence.
Yes.
Have you explored other alternatives? I mean, it's your business, you've been in it for 46 years, I get it. But have you explored anything else? And the reason I'm saying this is I'm concerned, and I'm concerned for the neighbors. And having these large illuminated signs on basically what this looks like is the west, north, and south entrances might be a lot. So if maybe you did and you just said no, but it would be great if when you come back you could kind of talk to us about your thought process.
But we'll certainly we'll put some more thought into it and see what we can come back with.
All right. There are also, one of the staff recommendations is to remove north, south, west signage. Consider if that's possible. Well, I'm not gonna do it, but consider if it's possible.
Sure.
Then,
I will mention, we are going, and maybe there's some movement on it, but there was a comment in here about signage on the canopy. For the fuel, we have to have some signage on the canopy. That's something that's gonna be it's
no, I
to
understand.
have our business work.
Is the canopy itself lit on the outer edging of it?
No. I've seen what you're talking about, but no.
Okay, it's strictly downlighting.
It's strictly down, and it's flush mounted down lighting, so it's not the old boxes that get filled with water and insects and stuff. It's flush mounted to the decking of the canopy.
Okay, so one of the things I noticed, I saw a drawing in here that had a gazillion little numbers in it.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it, and
And-
I see the numbers, I just don't know what I'm looking at.
So what you're looking at is numbers that you need a magnifying glass to read. And what those are, it's impossible to see in this. And we do have a full-size paper plan that we can pass out. Those are the foot candles. So that's the plan that the lighting expert, his company does, where they build a model. They put your building on the site. They say these are the fixtures that we're proposing. This is the house side shields that we're proposing, and this is the foot candles from that you're going to see. And the way foot candles work is it's literally an old time measurement of how many feet you could see a candle glow from. I could be sort of messing that up, and he can certainly speak to it and answer your questions.
Here, it'd be great.
Right here, yes.
That'd be great.
And this is Rich Hayden, who's our lighting consultant.
Hi, thank you. Rich Hayden with Parker Piechek, LSI Lighting. To address the foot candle ratios, those numbers that you're seeing on that paper, which are kind of hard to see. So what we do is we take into consideration the city codes, abiding by what foot candles that you allow on a commercial property of so forth. So we take that into consideration. We take a light fixture that will work kind of similar within the community. So what we chose a slimline fixture. We call this a slice fixture. The profile, it's on the bottom picture to the right there. The fixture is about 2 inches thick, so it's a real slim line, so it kind of loses loses its profile. When you're looking at it far away, you really don't see the fixture itself. It kind of loses its profile. That's what we wanted for this location, just because the community around. What we have put on all the perimeter lights, we've put a house light shield, and that's been addressed a couple of different times here this evening. But what that does is that eliminates any backward throw from that fixture at all. So all the fixtures themselves have forward throw optics. So when you're looking at optics on fixtures, they can be what's a type 5 or type 3, which throws light differently out from a fixture. So all these fixtures have what's called a forward throw. And what that does is that throws the light onto the property. But to get to where we want it to be, just for the security of everybody, the neighbors and the commercial properties next door, we've thrown house side shields on there. So it guarantees us that there's no light going to trespass off a waterways property.
What does that look like? Because this example of what you're showing doesn't appear to have any shield to it. On that lower right.
Oh. So, oh, the green button. So this one right here is what I'm talking about, this fixture here. So the shield itself, so let's just take this piece of paper here as the fixture. I'm the pole, and the property's behind me. There's a house side shield that drops down below this by about, I call it about 3 inches back behind the fixture and on the sides. So all the illumination from the fixture is directed onto the property.
So that's not represented in this
Not in that
picture,
picture,
okay.
it's not, sir. But we can add that to this drawing so it can be shown. So we can add the house side shield so it can be shown on there.
All right, so when I look at this with the numbers, I'm looking on would be the east side of this.
Which is-
There's 2 rows of numbers at the bottom, and, it's 0, 0, 0.0, 0.0, but at certain points it says 0.3. Does that mean 3/10 of a foot candle?
That's correct. Yes, sir. So let me just get back to what was stated earlier. 1 foot candle. If we would turn off a light in this room, we turn all the lights off and we set a candle in the middle of that room, the illumination level that you would see from 1 candle, that's the direction of where all lighting came from. It's 1 foot candle that you could see from 1 candle, 1 foot around that candle. So that's the illumination level of 1 foot candle.
That's 1.0.
I'm just telling you what 1 foot candle is.
Yeah.
Right? So within 1 foot of that candle in the room, you're getting 1 foot candle. It's a property, right?
Okay.
So when you're getting 0.3 foot candles, you're getting 7.7% less of a foot candle. So it's minimal. 0 is nothing, and 0.3 is 0.3 of a foot candle. Another indication, if you're a full moon on a full lit night, and you're out in your backyard and you can see a full moon, that is equivalent to 1 foot candle. If you look across your lawn or place of business, that's equivalent to about 1 foot candle. So that's how much, just so you can, in your mind, you understand what 1 foot candle is. That's a good representation of what 1 foot candle is.
That's all I have. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Chris?
Yeah, do you have any samples of materials tonight? Just specifically like the synthetic material we were talking about in the EFIS.
So we have, no, that's the one we don't.
Okay.
We've got the glass, we've got a brick. It's not the thin brick, but just as a representation of the color. We've got a representation color of the cast stone and of the pre-finished metal. So we can certainly bring a.
Can you set those up here, please?
Oh, absolutely.
And just some clarifying
Jeff, start with Chris.
questions to some of the other questions that were asked. The glass or the windows on the building, will those be tinted?
We propose that the glass is clear. It would be a low E for solar gain and for solar heat, but it would be clear glass is what we're proposing.
Okay.
And all the systems in the entire are 1-inch insulated glass system, so it's a typical storefront system.
And what are the frames? What,
Pre-finished metal,
What
pre-finished
color?
aluminum.
what color?
Dark bronze, there's a piece of it there.
And then going back to the signage, I'm just trying to understand the south side. So there's going to be a light, or there'll be a sign on the canopy, the waterway sign.
Yeah.
And then the signs that are in each of the filling areas, are those going to be the signs that you have in the packet that show the types of car washes that are available? So those are pretty big.
Those are the menu boards,
Signs,
yeah, that's
okay.
what we call them. And those, by the way, are not lit.
Okay, that was my next question. So the waterway sign on the canopy's lit,
Yeah.
but the
The menu
filling-
signs
menu
would
signs
not
will
be,
Okay. And then with respect to the landscaping, I mean, it was helpful to see just the visual and hear the explanation, but thinking about it from a traffic standpoint and thinking about it from the number of cars in the intersection coming and going, can you just comment on the sight lines and how they may be affected by the landscaping, and if you see any problems there?
Definitely. Always something to consider, especially at major intersections as this one here. So this plant material is low. It has 2 ornamentals that are set back. So we definitely looked at the site triangle requirements there. So there are 2 flowering ornamentals that are set back. Otherwise, we even have like as low as lawn right at the adjacency to the sidewalk. Then it gradually steps up to a lower ground cover that's, maxes out at 10 inches height, and then it goes up to a shrub that is more at the 24 to 30 inch height, and then it goes up to the ornamentals. So that is that particular intersection. As you come out of the exit here, we also have, see my reference here. In the medians, there's just a low area for what would be a flowering annual display. So that's going to have a low, 8 to 10 inches in there. And then adjacent, we have lawn up to here that's in the site triangle, and same as for down here in the parkway. And then again, it steps up to the ground cover, back to the shrubs before it has an ornamental right about in here. And then as far as here, both sides have the parkway lawn and then again, ground cover. So everything is relatively low and out of the sight lines.
So no major areas of obstruction by the entry and exit ways?
No.
Okay. And then one final lighting question. Can you just give us just a quick kind of explanation of where the poles would be placed, or just, point to it on the diagram for the east side? And then kind of that southeast side, just around the residential area, so we have a better idea of what we're thinking about. And just to confirm, you don't know the size of the poles yet?
I have laid it out to have what's considered, it's an 18-foot tall pole and a 2-foot base. So
Okay.
the poles are 18 foot, so a finished height of 20 foot is what we have designed, which is consistent with the area. Okay. So on the east side, here along this line here, I believe, I'm sorry, south side. So let's just start there. This is the south side. I believe this is a residential area on this side. So we have 2 poles, one approximately this right here, and another one kind of 3/4 way right down here. So with that, we have house side shields on those 2 fixtures. Along with that, I believe there's a 10-foot wall that's on that side too, I believe. Is that correct? So with that, we are guaranteeing that there's going to be no light trespass on the backside, because we already have it with the house side shields being 0 there. But with the wall itself, that's going to definitely make sure that there's no light there. Down below here, oh, shoot. I believe that's
I also
residential.
think on the lighting distribution plan that you have in your packet, there's, the lights are highlighted, if that
Yeah.
helps.
Yep. Okay.
And on that bottom side here, that's, what's that word? Could be the north, southeast corner right here. There's two fixture heads for employee parking that would be going there. So once again, we have house side shields on those perimeter fixtures. So with forward throw optics, making sure the light is being thrown onto the property, along with that 10-foot wall around the backside of those poles. So eliminating zero light trespassing off the property. And then once again, we have one single fixture here along that perimeter, which is, the backside of that is the commercial side. I believe there's also, is that a wall there also? So that fixture also has a house side shield on it with a forward throw optics to make sure the light, there's no light trespass, what they call light trespass. It's being thrown onto the property along with that 10-foot wall. It guarantees us a zero light trespass off the property.
Okay. And would all of these be shut down after hours, or would these be part of the security lights or lights that have to remain on?
I'll let
Overnight.
you address that, but
The large lights, the large pole lights would be, or the larger pole lights would be shut down after hours. The security lighting would typically just be either some interior lighting in the building, or we haven't gotten fire department comments. They typically say we need a smaller light at this corner, and they're just smaller security lights. But they don't tend to, they keep them away from the neighbors as much as they can.
Okay, thanks. No additional questions.
Thank you, Chris. I do have a number of questions, no particular order. Picking up on Chris's questions about the light poles, what necessitates an 18-foot pole?
well, with LED, so all the fixtures are LED. So on the canopy, the fixtures are LED, and also the area lights are LED also. So to be able to, because we're trying to keep all the light onto the property, the 18-foot tall pole allows us to be able to throw light further onto the property, to be able to stand within the foot candle ratios over the overall property. So we have to go to the 18-foot tall pole to get those ratios that are required.
Does an 18-foot pole create more ambient light, like a glow? While it wouldn't, if you look in the horizon at the city at night, you can see the glow in the air. It's not generating any lumens at all, but you can see the glow. And so my concern is, if you've got a pole that's 18 feet, could you achieve the same result with multiple poles that are shorter, not creating as much ambient glow?
Well, I'll address the ambient glow that you're seeing nowadays. So the new technology that is coming out now, it's LED. The glows that you're seeing from the cities now, they all haven't changed over to the LED, which is downward directional lighting, right? So when you're looking off in the distance, so even coming into Chicago or wherever, even a smaller community, you're still seeing lights that are street lights that are shining light outward and upward, right? So that's the kind of the glow that you're seeing. With the LED lights that we are putting here, that all light is directed downward. So we're not having any glow that's going upward. All that light is being directed downward. So we're not going to have any glow going up in the air. It's all being directed down to the property.
If I could just add something real quickly. And one of the goals in a lighting plan is not to have dark spots on your site. So, for safety and all, and, walk in at night. I am certain we have some flexibility on the 18-foot poles. We've certainly used shorter poles in the past, and that's something we can present when we speak to you next.
And I think it would be helpful also if you have examples in the area of what this lighting product is doing that we might be able to tour in the evening. Again, I don't want to discount your position at all, and I'd certainly respect that, but this is new. We're considering something that honestly, we're getting into an area of technology that's relatively new to us. So conceptually, just this old dog thinks shorter, more lights would be beneficial. But again, I'd love to see examples to help support your argument.
I will get some to Mike, and then he can forward that on to you.
Great. Kathy, was there a what was the impetus behind setting the fence height at 10 feet on that east elevation?
There was a lot of discussion about the buffer, and I think the thought was the higher the better. We had 3 acoustical engineers that were involved on behalf of different parties in discussions before the Plan Commission, and they did support a solid wood fence with no open seams, and they did say that 10 feet is better than 7.
Is it enough? Is where I'm going. I mean, obviously, you don't want to create the Great Wall of China here, but I'm particularly interested in cars that are entering the car wash, now directing their headlights east, whether 10 feet provides enough cushion for a car coming in and with their headlights pointing in that direction.
We could certainly request some light studies for headlights as they're pulling in and evaluate whether that 10-foot fence is adequate. Is that
Now-
something?
Now, the alternative is whether you have an arborvitae or some very dense evergreen that's year-round that can provide the same coverage in a more natural way. But I'd love to again, I don't want to create an overly obtrusive large fence. I don't think anyone wants that. But it would be nice to know that you've thought through that. Coming back to the roof and the mechanicals, is there an opportunity? My concern isn't so much that you create a well deep enough for whatever mechanicals are there, but with some cushion so that you're even recessed below that peak point. Would you have the ability to increase your roof height inward that gets you more height to create more depth if that's necessary? I don't know how much of that area you're planning to fill with mechanicals, but
There's probably at the most 3 mechanical units, probably 2 would be my guess. And it is just a guess until the engineers calculate the airflows that are required. We could possibly get higher with the, I don't know that we can go lower into the building with the well.
no, and I'm suggesting raising your peak roof line to, it would shrink your mechanical area, but.
Right, just letting it rise higher. I get it.
Right.
We could probably do a little, I'd want to study the massing on the exterior of the building, because then the back part of the roof is going to get up high as the front part. The gable ends would no longer be the prominent part. The mansard roof around the back would become prominent. I hate to get it so the proportions didn't look right with it.
Okay.
If we could get a little higher, yeah, I think it would absolutely.
Right. I would just want you to be mindful of being at the height of the mechanicals, in my mind, is not quite enough. I think there should be a little bit more
And
cushion.
honestly, when we get with the engineers, maybe we can get them lower. I mean, smaller units. It's possible. Redundant units is a good thing. If one goes down, you get another. So you do 4 small ones instead of 2 huge ones. Therefore, they're smaller. So we've can certainly entertain that, I think, and talk to the engineers.
And are the mechanicals strictly your heating and ventilation units, or anything more than, for instance, the noise from the blowers? Is that internal to the building, or are the mechanicals above it generating unusual excessive noise?
These are just typical heating and air conditioning.
Okay.
Do you have a generator?
No.
Power, is it power outage?
If power outages happen, we just haven't had. I guess that's why you have not a lot of people getting their car washed when that happens, and so that just hasn't been a real issue for us.
My understanding is that you've gone to great lengths to help accommodate concerns over noise, and one of that is extending the washing service area. In that floor plan, you identify what you call a finishing area. What exactly is being handled operationally in that part of the building?
I think we have. Let's. Okay, so we have 2 things. There's first this sound deadening chamber that we talked about. That's got the walls on both sides, and that's where the blowers are. Then we have the sound attenuation finishing room, and that's where the sound deadening materials are. The finishing area proper, that what we call the finishing area is maybe not what you're calling the finishing area. That's where the outside drying and those things occur.
Well, on your floor plan on the inside, where that
Yeah,
is that light green or on the right, that area.
yeah.
So if you could maybe just walk through, a car is coming in, you're
Yeah,
doing
sure.
nothing on the left side of the building, all the washing is occurring in that large room,
Sure.
and then
Yeah, so the car gets on the, or places on the conveyor right here, just, although it's not there, that's where the fuel canopy is, somewhere over there. Goes through the different equipment, washes, cleans it, uses soaps and detergents, then comes through this smaller entryway into this room. That's where the blowers are.
and is a car fitting in that
Oh, yeah.
area?
Yeah. And yeah, so the car fits within that area. Then we just have nothing. This is just dead zone right here. This is the area that we added by extending the building as just an area for sound to fade and to be attenuated as much as we can with the different sound deadening materials. So typically a car wash, the blower would be right there. And we pulled it back that 25 feet, and the sound experts certainly did agree that was a significant step in keeping the sound down.
Can you use this opportunity to elaborate what the sound dampening features are?
So
for everyone, I'm sure people here are concerned about that, so this is
Sure.
an opportunity to speak to that.
Sure. So the sound dampening features are there's several. One is we're using a blower that is different than the blowers that some people who've seen our other sites. We're using a blower that the blower, pardon me, itself is lower decibel level. And as I discussed earlier, we've got door and door. Which again will not go up and down between every single car, and I've tried to make sure I've said that every time. The majority of the time, we believe it will. What the sound experts used as a plug was 2/3 of the time. I think that was being very conservative. I suspect it'll be more a higher percentage of the time they'll go up and down, but I think 2/3 of the time seemed like a very conservative number. Then, as I mentioned, we've got the walls, and think of the tunnel being 15 feet tall. The top of the equipment is 12 feet tall. So these walls that we're putting into these two spots right here and here is they tighten it up. So they go all the way out to the walls because the equipment obviously has some space on the other side of the tunnel. So we tighten it up there, then we tighten it up all the way up to the ceiling to help seal that noise in. And so we get the noise sealed in here as much as possible. And then, as I said, we've got this newfound 25 feet, which that is something we have not done before, to have this sound attenuation finishing room. And there's no equipment there. There's nothing happening there except it just gives the car a little bit of time to pull off and gives the noise an opportunity to be attenuated.
Is there any baffling material, like against the walls or anything that helps absorb any of, just to make sure the sound's not
Yeah.
reverberating out of like a cave or a...
So in
Projecting.
this room, on the walls and the ceilings, there is a material. So what it is basically a soft fiberglass type material that's within a metal perforated metal panel. You put those on the wall and the ceiling, and that's meant to, and that's built to suck in noise. It is. Obviously, it's going to be a wet environment. There's going to be some water in there no matter what. And these are sort of an outdoor type of use for this kind of material. So it can handle the wet environment.
Okay, thank you. My last question is on trash pickup. Being on the south end of the building and the closest to the residents, is there any sense on time of day that garbage trucks would be pulling in to empty garbage out?
I do not know. I have not looked into that. What I'll tell you is originally we had the dumpster enclosure right down here. In response to some of the resident concerns, we decided to move it up here. So the time of day will typical with garbage is not going to be a time of day where it's typically pretty early. I just haven't talked to or contacted the garbage company up here.
Well, I would just urge you to be sensitive to trucks if they're needing to back up and their backup alarm is
The beepers.
sounding. I mean, no one wants to hear that at 5 a.m. So
Sure, understood.
please take that into consideration in terms of how a garbage truck will be getting in and out of that location. Then my last question, I'm having difficulty understanding where the property line is relative to the road on the east side of the your fence line. Are you if you're doing any vegetation to help buffer your property from the east, do you need to put it on the east side of your fence line, or do you have room on your side of the fence line to do that?
Oh, we're putting a tremendous amount on our side of the fence line. This was a supplement to what we're putting on our side. Is what we're happy to put on our neighbor's side.
I know I told you that was my last question. There was one last question I had. Coming to your east elevation, and I hate putting a focus on a side that doesn't get a lot of exposure, but because you are looking at one large expanse of brick, would you consider saying an inlaid brick pattern I'm not talking about anything fancy, but just some simple pattern that helps break up a very monotonous long wall? Again, it doesn't have to be fancy because no one's really seeing it, but it just...
We've certainly done, I don't know what would fit with the building. I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is a soldier's course, but if you do a soldier's course, you can do that all around the building. I don't know, but I'm certain we can play with that elevation a little bit and see what we can do just to do it's long and flat.
Yeah, again, I don't want you to over-engineer something that not many people are going to be seeing, but again, just give some thought to how that might break that up.
Sure.
That is the last question I have for you. Is there anything else that you have for the staff or the petitioner before we open it up to public questions? Okay, with that, go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. We've got actually a list of folks who've identified themselves as wanting to speak. I will call you up in order, and certainly if you have not filled out a form here, please see Kathy, and we'll make sure you get your questions addressed. Again, my marching orders are, with respect to everyone's time and a lot of folks who are going to want to speak, please limit your comments to 5 minutes. We will cut you off, so please be concise and direct in whatever your questions are. Depending on the nature of the question, I'd be inclined to say we just hear all the questions and then ask the petitioner and staff to address them in whole. We'll keep track of what your questions are. I expect there'll probably be multiple petitioners that might have the same question. And then also, again, my final request to you is, again, this is the Building Review Board. The purview is the architectural lighting and impact on the surrounding area in terms of the landscaping and those features. So please keep your comments focused. This is not the forum to be expressing your displeasure with the decision to move forward with the gas station on this site. With that, our first question is Marianne Redding. If you'd be kind enough to approach the podium. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm addressing some of the concerns regarding the landscaping. The proposed landscaping on the circumference of the parcel is inadequate in height and needs to have more lush and robust vegetation around it. The landscaping needs to be consistent with the flourishing green culture of Lake Forest. It needs to be portrayed as a park-like setting with an ambiance of green vegetation and plant life, rather than an industrial feel with heavy machinery and excessive noise with unpleasant odors. It would be helpful to seek input perhaps from the Lake Forest Garden Club for the residents affected as to the height, width, and variety of trees and shrubs and vegetation. The Garden Club is well versed in what is expected in visually maintaining the green culture of Lake Forest. So the landscaping should be beefed up. Also, the petitioner was required to plant and maintain 8-foot-high arborvitae trees on its eastern and southern borders. This would be on the outside barriers that are to be built separating the business site from the residences. The aesthetics of the immediate adjacent neighbors needs to be addressed in more detail to act as a buffer. Nowhere in the proposed special use permit conditions has the landscaping been detailed, especially when it comes to the residents directly affected. And I know this has been mentioned. That was the scripted part of my concern. I have just an unscripted comment or two I would like to make. I guess my dream for that corner has always been to be a little bit more bold and dynamic. And I had this little fantasy that we would get our beloved Lake Forest architect, Adrian Smith, who is, I don't even know him, but he's world-renowned for his beautiful buildings. And he would get together with Sandy Stewart, and they would together collaborate on a building that would make a statement for that corner. Something bold and iconic and classic, and perhaps maybe a landmark that our children and grandchildren would be very proud of, and they would say, wow, the city planners really thought ahead. What we need is the architectural integrity to be maintained for Lake Forest. I do have one question that the architect mentioned about the roofing. I live in the Evergreen neighborhood directly to the east of the proposed car wash area, and I am on the board of our neighborhood. And so when somebody brings a plan to us to review to build a home, we need to make sure that it fits with the character and architectural integrity of our neighborhood. One of the things that was recently proposed was a new roof, and it was a synthetic roof, and the city of Lake Forest denied it, saying that it was unacceptable initially. And so I noticed that they did not have a sample for the roof. And so my question would be, I would like to know more about why it was deemed unacceptable by the city of Lake Forest. We're only allowed cedar shake or tile in our neighborhood, and we are very close to this proposed car wash. So that would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Redding. David, is it Kaz? Yes. Kaz, thank you. Good evening.
So first, my compliments to you guys, because I thought we were only going to talk about architectural stuff, and you guys hit on a lot of the reasons that this doesn't fit in a residential neighborhood. So my compliments to you, especially on sound and the truck noises and things like that. I'm addressing lighting. So I was part of a team that met with several of the folks over in Northbrook, and from what we saw of the 26 car washes these guys own, that may be the closest one to a residential area. There's about 10 townhouses that are within about 300 feet. So that's the closest. Not nearly as close as we are to this proposed one. That being said, second to the noise issue in Northbrook is the lighting. So we met with one couple near the entrance side of the car wash, that 18-foot pole that you talked about, it's shown into their second bed, their second floor, and they did have to buy light attenuating new drapes for that room. So again, I appreciate that they're talking about, lighting being directed down, but the light does penetrate into their house. And then, Mr. Knotts, I think you brought up this idea of cars driving into the car wash. That was another issue that they have in Northbrook. So when the cars enter and they're going into the gas pumps or going up to the car wash, those lights shine into the houses. And again, those houses are maybe 300 feet away, 400 feet. We've got houses that are going to be like 20, 50 feet away from this thing. So the light is definitely an issue. One of the ideas that was brought up at the Plan Commission meeting, the last Plan Commission meeting was, and I think it was Mr. Freeman who said he's not in the business of picking winners and losers, so the hours for the car wash by us should be the same as the ones in downtown Lake Forest. And as you can see, downtown Lake Forest, it's 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday, and 9 to 3 on Sunday. What's nice about that is the lights will be shut off, as darkness comes upon us. 9 to 3, it's still light out, so then it's not as much of a lighting issue. If it's 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday, again, lighting is not going to be as much of an issue. So my question to you guys is, and again, it's not architectural, but it was brought up, we don't want to pick winners and losers. These guys should not be allowed to be open later than the car wash in East Lake Forest. So if it adheres to the same hours, that was the recommendation. I'd like to throw that back out to you.
And again, for the record, that's not the proof of this board, so.
Okay, it's related to the lighting, so that's why I bring it up. So I think the issue of the light poles, they do have that 18 to 20-foot light pole in Northbrook, and that is what shines in the window. They do have, I think, a 10-foot wall that does nothing to block the light into the residence, nor does it stop the headlights coming into the residence there. And the resident there did ask Waterway to address the issue. They put up a couple of trees that did nothing. So it is important that we figure out how to prevent the lighting, both from the cars and from those tall poles, coming into our houses.
Thank you very much. Kent Carson.
Good evening. My name is Kent Carson, and I've lived in Lake Forest for over 35 years. I'm also a my profession during my work career was with a major petroleum company. I'm quite familiar with car washes, retail stations, and convenience stores. I'd like for you just to kind of take for a moment and picture what this site is going to look like in relationship to 200 cars, plus numerous landscape vehicles, transport trucks, all coming in and out of this site. Given that, there is a proposed wooden fence that's going to go around the east side and the south side of this property. I have to say that wooden fence would be detrimental to the maintenance and the appearance and the cleanliness of this site. As you know, with that much traffic on this site, cars will have a tendency to bump into the wooden fences, along with the dump trucks and along with the petroleum trucks that go in and out of this site. There's been a lot of money being spent on this site. It would be nice to have that wooden fence replaced with a stone or a brick fence, because it will withstand the numerous nudges and bumps that a wooden fence will not withstand when you have cars coming in and out of this facility at the rate that they are. So I'd like for you to consider that as one of the recommendations that you would make. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Richard Sugar.
First is David, I'm Richard Sugar. I live about 20 feet from the parcel lot line. I want to compliment you, as David did, on being as due diligent as you have been, because this project is imposing on Lake Forest a condition of Lake Forest being a guinea pig. They have 19 other sites. On those 19 other sites, they all are on they're at intersections that face highways. There are no residences that close as there are here. So I appreciate your being diligent and protecting the neighborhood. In terms of the landscaping, there had been no interactive discussion initiated by Waterway with the neighbors about the kind of landscaping that we prefer, that we would appreciate on our side, so that when we're looking at this 10-foot barrier, we don't have to look at the Wall of China. We would look at something that is appropriate for Lake Forest. When we have guests come, I don't want them to look at a wall. I want them to look at good landscaping. In addition, the landscaping would help to muffle the noise. If you have arborvitae along the barrier, that would help muffle the noise. Finally, on a design issue and an architectural issue, I have to call your attention to the fact that in all of the meetings before the Plan Commission and before the City Council, the one ordinance factor that was never satisfied is this ordinance factor of the property being adapted to different additive uses. In other words, if Waterway leaves, what architecturally can be done with that property? And I'm afraid that it's a single-purpose, single-use building, and that's not going to be able to be reused in an adapted, additive way. And what that leads to is the necessity for having an adequate bond to protect the city, to protect the taxpayers when Waterway becomes obsolete, as they surely will be in the future because of driverless cars and clean energy vehicles. We're going to be left with another eyesore. So we have to make sure, the city has to make sure, the government has to make sure that there is adequate protection when Waterway has to move out and they go obsolete. What about Sandy Stewart, the owner of the property? Well, he has what looks to me like a single-purpose LLC. There's nothing behind it other than the property itself. So I don't know how that will protect the city in terms of repurposing that property. So I ask you to give that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sugar. Jim Monroe.
Good evening, board members, city officials, ladies and gentlemen, Waterway representatives. I wonder if we can, on the slideshow, go back to where it shows the sound attenuation finishing room. Is it possible to bring that back up on the presentation? Thank you. Over the course of the last few meetings, there have been two aspects of this particular petition that is basically untested. The first one that I would draw everybody's attention to is the sound attenuation finishing room. Number one, I'd like to have an address of another facility that Waterway owns that has a sound attenuation finishing room. Can you provide one for us? So if there isn't another waterway that has this sound attenuation room, therefore, it's untested. And in fact, it's just a theory. It may work, and then again, it may not work. The second aspect of it is the rapid close door. That is a fabric door, and I don't believe that that is in any of your facilities as well. Is it, sir? And where is that facility that has the rapid close door? Okay, so again, that is a untested piece of technology. And I find it irresponsible that we would consider that just on its unmerits that this is going to mitigate sound, because I'm not convinced that it will, and I believe that there are a lot of other people that aren't convinced that a fabric door is going to diminish the sound to the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rudy Schwartz.
Thank you for giving me the time to explain my issues. My issues are mainly I'm the first neighbor closest to the waterway. And I'm very, very concerned with the 10-foot high fence. I don't know why it has to be a wood fence instead something else which might be more applicable, like a concrete or anything else, which I'm very concerned also about the light. So I don't know if there's something can be done. The light. I'm at 1036 Marlene Drive, and I'm very, very concerned about the fence and the light issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I apologize. Gary, is it Jan? Spahn? Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'm Gary Spahn. I live at 1111 South Waukegan Road, which is the complex immediately south of the property and contiguous to it. I've lived there for 20 years and am on the board. I've got several questions, one of which either I have missed or don't understand or it hasn't come up yet, and that is the ground elevation of this plan. The property, you may have noticed the northern, roughly half of it, is about 4 feet higher than the southern half of it. So my question is the site on the north end going to be brought down 4 feet, or is the other end going to be raised up? And I would certainly hope that the grade would be built at the lower grade to avoid any runoff that would come from having it higher. The other concern that I have is regarding the signage and the visibility of this. I want a commercial facility that blends into the other development rather than one that stands out by itself. I don't think we want the car wash to be a landmark of Southwest Lake Forest. There's mention in there of a 32 square foot monument sign. which exceeds the current laws, and I don't understand any justification to make a bigger sign than the law currently provides. I don't know if this sign is going to be elevated. I presume it's going to be elevated, or the plan is. And I would also ask that if the sign is put at the south end, that it be on the north side of the entrance. If it's put on the south side of the entrance, it's virtually in our front yard. As you can see go back to the site plan, the entrance on the south end is right on our property line. And if that sign gets crammed in south of that entrance, it's really almost on our front yard. So I'd be concerned about that, and also ask just that all of the signage be consistent with the signage that's around. When McDonald's went in there, we didn't let them put up any golden arches. And I think it's important that, in general, that all signage blend in and be consistent with what Sunset has and what the other businesses in the area have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spahn. Walter Wade.
Thank you for the time. Two questions. One is on landscaping. With the amount of landscaping that's going to go in there, I would hope that you would require a maintenance contract on a weekly basis to maintain the landscaping, the plants, and the look of the facility. That's going to be really important to maintain the look of what's going on there. The other thing is that on this sound deadening chamber, from the dialogue here this past fall, the mayor talked about the noise from snow blowers. And he said, believing we are all entitled to quiet enjoyment of our homes. My question is, if the sound chamber doesn't work, what is Lake Forest going to do for a remedy for the homeowners in the area to mitigate that noise? Anything? Are we stuck? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wade. That is it for folks who signed notices that they'd like to speak. Is there anyone else in attendance who would like to address the board or petitioner? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to bring this back to the petitioner. If you'd be kind enough to come up to the podium. There are a number of themes that we've discussed at length already, but some new questions that I'd like to start with, and then let you address any other comments that you'd like to respond to. In terms of the technology of the concept of this sound dampening chamber, can you help walk us and the audience through the process you came to derive that this is a concept that will work? Have engineers or architects familiar with sound dampening efforts? It's certainly, dampening sound is not a new concept.
No.
So if you could address the lengths to which you got that professional input and their conclusions.
So this concept came from the acoustical engineer, and put it most simply, it's distance is the best thing to reduce sound. And that makes sense to everybody. You don't have to be a sound engineer to understand that. And he said, if you could pull your blowers back into the tunnel, that should make a significant impact. And we said, okay, can you model it out for us? And that's what he did. He did a model, and they went way into detail. Both the acoustic engineer who we hired and the acoustic engineer who the city hired, and about how sound works, about how this extra space will help reduce the overall sound. And he did, and I'm not armed with those numbers off the top of my head. he did show, our sound and acoustic engineer did show an actual decibel level reduction by doing this. So yes, I have absolutely been, I hope I've been very clear, we have not done this before, but this is not something that just came out of, hey, this might be something good to try. This was what our sound expert, and as far as talking to the architect, those walls that we're putting on in the inside, that was something we discussed with them about what's the best way to contain the sound, and that's where we said, okay, let's build this chamber before the finishing room, and that's where that concept came from.
Great. A number of discussions, both questions that I raised and some of our audience members, in terms of the construction or materials of that fence. Can you share with us your thought processes on concluding that wood was the best material, and then just reaffirm your commitment to working with both the board and the residents who will be looking at that in terms of what the end result landscaping will be to help make it the most appealing for those who are looking at it every day?
Absolutely. I think the first thought is we happen to think that the wood fence is more attractive than building a tall sort of masonry wall that'd be 10 feet tall, and we believe the wood fence is more attractive. That's obviously, everybody has an opinion, but that is our opinion. As far as the attenuation of the sound, going back to that is, again, what both the sound engineer that we hired, and fortunately the city hired their own to give some clarity. They both agreed that a board-to-board fence would do that sound, would be as good a sound attenuation as a thicker type of wall. As far as the maintenance of the landscape, I will tell you, in our company, we are known in communities for our landscape. We've won numerous landscape awards in different communities throughout the country. That's not something that is just, we maintain our sites because our sites need to look good. As far as putting the landscape on the neighbor's property, we did bring that up in two different neighborhood meetings that we've had. We haven't been able to reach any kind of agreement, but that's what we've proposed, as well as with when the landscape engineer, or landscape architect, pardon me, met with the city forester. And for instance, those willow trees that she mentioned, which apparently, I don't know much about trees, apparently they are not the healthiest willow trees, and it's something that the city forester had said these probably need to go. We said, okay, well then we can replace those. Neighbors, tell us what you'd like, and we don't know.
One aspect we didn't discuss was your grading and how you're balancing the site. If you could address.
Yeah, so we're actually going to be bringing, it's not going to be a even. We're going to be bringing it down from the north side to the south side. So we actually are going to be grading it down. Now the south, and there has been a grading plan done, but it does come down generally. And we did provide a plan early on to the city showing stormwater and keeping all of our stormwater on site, actually in a much better situation than it is currently, where the stormwater tends to go off-site behind into the neighboring properties.
So the north elevation and the south elevations will each maintain their existing grades?
No, the north elevation is actually coming down a little bit. And I believe it's coming down to meet the south elevation. But
Will the buildings be stepped?
No, and it's not. It might look like 4 feet. I think it's about 2 feet, 2 1/4. So it's just gonna come down.
A gradual change over this.
Yeah.
From north or east, north to south.
North to south. Yeah.
One question coming back on lighting, in terms of with LED technology, there's bright white light, there's warm light. Have you given any thought to the tone of that light?
There, in the lighting study, they would have chosen what I call a clean light. And I wouldn't know how to name it, and we can certainly ask.
So in the lighting study that we did, there was a cool white light that was chosen for this. Now, we can also go to a warm light, and then there's also a neutral white. So between the differences are, there's a station right across the street, that station on its canopy has what's called cool white. It's kind of a brighter white there. Then there's the next level down, which is called warm white, which in gradient time, so cool white is like 5,000 Kelvin. So sunlight is roughly 5,200 Kelvin. So cool white is around 5,000 Kelvin. Warm white, neutral white, which is that next level down, is around 4,000 Kelvin. The next level down is what's called a neutral white, which is more around the color of these lights in this room, which is around 3,500, or an incandescent bulb you might have in your house. Those are the light levels. On the lighting plan that we did, we chose a cool white, which met with inside the codes of your city for the light levels. So that's why we chose cool white. We can change that to a neutral white or a warm white. You know, it just depends on what you all want. But we chose cool white for doing the lighting plan.
Okay. I think in large part from my notes of the comments we got, if we haven't already addressed, I think we addressed it at one point or another. I certainly, Kathy, the petitioner mentioned that the city hired an engineer to lend an opinion in terms of the design that was put into place. Can you speak to that at all?
The city did hire an acoustical engineer, and he reviewed both the study prepared by the petitioner's acoustical engineer and an acoustical engineer hired by the neighbors as well. And the sound engineer advised the city that the measures that were proposed are really extraordinary for a car wash. Importantly, as the Plan Commission and City Council discussed this matter, they have asked us to work to refine a process for monitoring, measuring the sound periodically, both after construction, prior to opening, and then on a periodic basis, and to really look at a process that would allow the city to bring in an acoustical engineer, do those measurements, and assure, I forget what the exact measurement was, I believe that the noise level would not be any greater than 2 decibels over ambient sound, and that needs to be further defined. But there was a process to assure on an ongoing basis that the commitment to keeping sound levels down would be adhered to.
Now, on that point about ambient sound, we're talking about an extraordinarily busy train intersection right there and a very busy car intersection. So I assume we're taking into account there's a tremendous amount of background noise already at that location.
And that detail will need to be worked through as part of the condition. One of the things that the city's acoustical engineer required is that ambient noise also be measured after 7 p.m. So at a time when things are quieter. Obviously, the car wash hours don't go much beyond 7 p.m. as currently proposed. So there was focus on putting something in place that we still need to finally define to assure that the commitment to sound levels would be adhered to.
Okay. I think we've addressed public comment. Is there any other questions or comments you have for city staff or that you would like to discuss with the petitioner?
I had a couple other responses to public comment that I don't think were addressed
Okay.
yet. Mr. Sugar raised the question about whether the building is appropriate for adaptive reuse. That is something, certainly you recently worked through that with Chase Bank in your review of that. This building, because of the function as a car wash, really isn't one that would be adaptively reused very elegantly, I guess is the way I'd put it. So instead, there is a requirement, and again, the city attorney is working on the language that would require removal of the building or removal of the canopy in the event that the uses cease to operate. So rather than a building that would be adaptively reused, this building is fairly simple. It's a single story. It would likely be a site that is completely redeveloped rather than adaptively reused. And then the one other one, there was a question about roof products for residential neighborhoods. The Building Review Board and the city's residential design guidelines do support natural materials for roofs, either cedar or slate, or a traditional material like asphalt shingles. We have had more discussion about a synthetic product that imitates either slate or wood shingles. That is something we're looking at. There have been some homes in the Evergreen subdivision that have moved forward with that product, but that is a different consideration. As you talked about, with commercial buildings, there is a need for some different products.
Right. Thank you, Kathy. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I'd move to continue the petition based upon our comments and all the additional ideas that we came up with today. There's a lot, and everything else that's in the staff report, those 18 recommendations.
Someone say?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great.
That was a lot.
Congratulations, keep up the work, a lot of, it doesn't go unnoticed, you're putting a lot of effort into this, and certainly we, the Building Review Board, appreciates what you're doing to help accommodate all the concerns with the project, and we look forward to a successful end result.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. With that concludes our formal agenda. Is there any other business for the board? Okay, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.
I'm going to oppose that.